Hello, my name is Lindsay Palmo, and I will be talking about open source software. First, let me go over what I will be talking about. Definition of open source, what open source software is, what are the differences between open source software and other softwares, the importance of open source software, why people use open source software companies, and then my conclusion. First off, open source definition. Open source is software with source code that anyone can inspect, modify, and enhance. This is from open source. Secondly, what is open source? Open source software must comply with free redistribution, source code, derived works, integrity of the author's source code, no discrimination against persons or groups, no distribution against fields of endeavor, distribution of license. License must not be specific to a product. License must not restrict other software, and license must be technology neutral. According to Open Source Initiative, free redistribution is the license shall not restrict any party from selling or giving away the software away as a component of an aggregate software distribution containing programs from several different sources. The license shall not require a royalty or other fee for such sale. Source code must be included in open source software and must allow distribution in source code as well as compiled form where some form of a product is not distributed with source code. There must be a well-publicized means of obtaining the source code for no more than a reasonable reproduction cost, preferably downloading via the internet without charge. The source code must be the preferred form in which a programmer would modify the program. Deliberately obfuscated source code is not allowed. Intermediate forms such as the output of a preprocessor or translator are not allowed. This is stated in Open Source Initiative. Thirdly, the license must allow modifications and derived works and must allow them to be distributed under the same terms as the license of the original software, as noted in Open Source Initiative. Fourthly, integrity of the author's source code according to Open Source Initiative is the license may restrict source code from being distributed in modified form only if the license allows the distribution of patch files with the source code for the purpose of modifying the program at build time. The license must explicitly permit distribution of software built from modified source codes. The license may require derived works to carry from a different name or version number from the original software. Furthermore, the license must not discriminate against any person or groups. This is according to Open Source Initiative. Also, the license must not restrict anyone from making use of the program in a specific field of endeavor. For example, it may not restrict the program from being used in business or being used for genetic research, as stated in Open Source Initiative. Furthermore, the rights attached to the programs must apply to all whom the program is redistributed without the need for execution of an additional license by those parties, which is stated in Open Source Initiative. Continuing on, the rights attached to the program must not depend on the programs being part of a particular software distribution. If the program is extracted from that distribution and used or distributed within the terms of the program's license, all parties to whom the program is redistributed should have the same rights as those that are granted in conjunction with the original software distribution. This is reported in Open Source Initiative. Second to last, the license must not place restrictions on other software that is distributed along with licensed software. For example, the license must not insist that all other programs distributed on the same medium must be open source software, as stated in Open Source Initiative. Finally, no provision of the license may be predicted on any individual technology or style of interface, as stated in Open Source Initiative. Now, continuing on, part of open source software is source code, which is the part of the software that most computer users don't ever see. It's the code computer programmers can manipulate to change how a piece of software works. This is stated in opensource.com. So what must comply with many rules and source code is what open source software is. So thirdly, there are differences between open source software and other types of software. A type of software that is not open source software is proprietary or closed software, which is source code that only the person, team, or organization who created it can modify. This is stated in opensource.com. In this software, as noted in opensource.com, is only the original authors of proprietary software can legally copy, inspect, and alter that software. And in order to use proprietary software, computer users must agree that they will not do anything with the software that the software's authors have not expressly permitted. An example of proprietary software is Microsoft Office. Open source software is different than other softwares because its authors make its source code available to others who would like to view that code, copy it, learn from it, alter it, or share it. This is stated in opensource.com. Some examples of open source software are LibreOffice and GNU image manipulation program. In addition, open source software users must accept the terms of a license when they use open source software, but the legal terms of open source license differ dramatically from those of proprietary license, which is stated in opensource.com. These are just some differences between open source software and other softwares. Furthermore, the importance of open source software. Open source software is important to everyone, not just computer programmers. OpenSource.com states, every time computer users view web pages, check email, chat with friends, stream music online, or play multiplayer video games, their computers, mobile phones, or gaming consoles connect to a global network of computers using open source software to route and transit their data to the local devices they have in front of them. The computers that do all this important work are typically located in faraway places that users don't actually see or can't physically access, which is why some people call these computers remote computers. I am definitely a person who uses open source software because I complete many of these that I just listed. Open source software is important because it helps most of the world do activities that involve the internet. Moreover, why people use open source software. There are 4 main reasons why people use open source software. These are control, training, security, and stability. First, control. Open source software gives people more control, which is what they like. As stated in opensource.com, control allows people to examine the code to make sure it's not doing anything they don't want it to do, as they change parts of it they don't like. Secondly, training, because it helps them become better programmers. Because open source code is publicly accessible, students can easily study it as they learn to make better software. Students can also share their work with others, inviting comment and critique as they develop their skills. When people discover mistakes in programs' source code, they can share those mistakes with others to help them avoid making those same mistakes themselves. This is stated in opensource.com. Thirdly, security. OpenSource.com states, because anyone can view and modify open source software, someone might spot and correct errors or omissions that a program's original author might have missed. And because so many programmers can work on a piece of open source software without asking for permission from original authors, they can fix, update, and upgrade open source software more quickly than they can proprietary software. This is why people prefer open source software, because it's more secure. Finally, stability is why people prefer it. OpenSource.com states, many users prefer open source software to proprietary software for important long-term projects. Because programmers publicly distribute the source code for open source software, users relying on that software for critical tasks can be sure their tools won't disappear or fall into disrepair if their original creators stop working on them. Additionally, open source software tends to both incorporate and operate according to open standards. Control, training, security, and stability are 4 main reasons why people use open source softwares. Finally, there are many open source companies. These include Adobe, Automatic, Black Duck Software, Canonical, Chef, CloudBees, Cloudera, Confluent, Databricks, and DataStax. Number 1 is Adobe. According to Datamation, Adobe has a strong commitment to open source and has more than 250 public repositories on its GitHub site. Some of its best-known open-source projects are developer tools like the PhoneGap Web Developer Framework, the Bracket Text Editor, and the Top Code CSS library. Second most open-source software is Automatic. Automatic is a company that people do not think that they know, but this company created WordPress, which is well known. According to the website, WordPress currently powers 28% of the internet. This is noted in Datamation's article about the 35 top open source companies. Thirdly is Black Duck software. Datamation states that Black Duck software offers 3 key projects: Hub for identifying and managing open source software at use in an environment, Protect for ensuring compliance with open source license and company policies, and Security Checker for identifying security vulnerabilities in open source software. It boasts more than 2,000 customers, including Intel, Nintendo, SAP, and Samsung. Fourthly is Canonical. This company is located in London, and Datamation states this is the company behind Ubuntu, one of the most popular Linux distributions on the planet. In fact, the company claims that Ubuntu is the world's most popular operating system across public clouds and OpenStack clouds. Canonical's mission is to make open source software available to people everywhere. We believe the best way to fuel innovation is to give the innovators the technology they need. Fifthly is Chef. Chef, according to Datamation, is the name of both an open source system integration framework and the company that owns the framework. As DevOps have become more widely adopted, Chef has emerged as one of the most popular tools for automating configuration management. Sixthly is CloudBees. CloudBees is the company behind Jenkins, which was number 14 on that TechCrunch list of popular open source projects. Jenkins is an open source automation server, which means that it helps speed up software development by automating processes like documentation, staging, deployment, and more. This is stated in Datamation's article about the 35 top open source companies. 7 is Cloudera. Cloudera is number 7 because it offers one of the most popular supported versions of Hadoop. Cloudera has become increasingly important as the big data trend has taken off. Its chief architect, Doug Cutting, founded Hadoop, and the company says it has contributed more code to the Hadoop ecosystem than anyone else. Its employees have started more than 20 Hadoop-related projects and are very active on Apache Foundation projects. Datamation notes this. 8th is Confluent. This company, according to Datamation, is a major player in the big data space. Confluent is the company behind Apache Kafka, which was the 20th on that list of the most popular open source projects. The company describes Kafka as a distributed streaming platform capable of handling trillions of events a day. It was originally created at LinkedIn and was released under an open source license in 2011. The team behind the project founded Confluent as an independent company, and today it offers a commercially supported version of the software. 9th is Databricks. Databricks is the company that supports another very popular big data streaming project, Apache Spark. The developers that founded the project started Databricks in 2013 to offer commercial support for the effort. According to the company, Spark has the largest open source community in big data with over 1,000 contributors from 250 plus organizations. Well-known Databricks customers include NBC Universal, HP, Shell, Cisco, 3M, and many others. This is stated in Datamation. Lastly is DataStax. Datamation writes, DataStax offers a commercially supported version of the Apache Cassandra. NoSQL database, as well as a managed cloud solution also based on Cassandra. It claims that more than 500 customers and more than 50 countries. Well-known companies that use its products include Netflix, Safeway, Adobe, Intuit, and eBay. Adobe, Automatic, Black Duck Software, Canonical, Chef, CloudBees, Cloudera, Confluent, Databricks, and DataStax are just 10 of many companies that are open source companies. In conclusion, I listed the definition of what open source software is. I elaborated on what open source software is. Then I explained the difference between the open source software and other types of software. I continued on by explaining the importance of open source software. Then I explained why people use open source software, which is because of control, training, security, and stability. Finally, I listed off 10 companies that are open source software, with Adobe being number 1. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned more about what open source software is and why you use it.